Ready when you are, Chair.
Welcome everyone to the meeting. This is the virtual meeting of the Council's Monitoring and Audit Committee. I'm asking viewers on YouTube and those involved in the meeting for patience with proceedings. If anyone loses their connection, a councillor loses their connection, we will stop the meeting to see if we can restore the connection within a reasonable time. Right, we only have 2 more meetings of this committee on the 25th of November and 3 July before this council disbands. I would like to start with a vote of thanks to Councillor Jonathan West for all the work he's done in the past years as chair of this committee. It'll be a hard act to follow. Right, all speakers will be introduced by their name prior to speaking. And I will introduce each item by reading out the full title of the report as it appears on the agenda. And the chair's ruling during the debate will be final. Here's the following protocol for member and public participation and the order and rules of the debate. Firstly, the officer will present the report. Speakers on the speakers list will be invited from the waiting room in the order they are listed, providing they are virtually present. Then that will be followed by a member debate, comments and questions. Then the chair will read out the officer recommendation and that members will be voting on. The recommendation will be proposed and seconded, and then we'll have the vote, and the committee administrator will record the vote by asking each member by name whether they wish to vote for, against, abstain, and will provide a final result. And then the chair will state the result, the decision reached. Right, can we have a register of those present? Can I ask Anne to take a register?
Thank you, Chair. If you could just indicate present, say present, for the benefit of those who may be just listening via audio. Councillor Anne Lee, Chair.
Present.
Councillor Jonathan West.
You need to unmute, Jonathan.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Greg Titcombe.
Present.
Councillor Margaret Talbot.
You need to unmute, Mark. Or you could just press the space bar.
It's just come up. Yes, present.
Councillor Mike Tebbott.
Present.
We also have in the meeting Lisa Hyde, Executive Director. Rob Thompson, Benefits and Business Support Manager.
Present.
Callum Galuzzo, Committee Manager. And myself,
Present.
Democratic Services Manager and Committee Administrator for this meeting. Rob Thompson, Income and Debt Manager. Rochelle Matheson, Head of Commercial Development. Carly Hone, Housing Strategy and Solutions Manager. James Wilson, Interim Head of Development Services. And John Conway, Head of Housing. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Right, we've come to the apologies. Do we have any apologies?
Yes, Chair, we've received apologies from Councillor Jenny Henson.
Do we know of any other apologies?
If I may, Chair, Guy Holloway is in the meeting and will join the meeting at 4:30 on the item of key performance booklet, if that's okay. We can keep an eye out for him to let him into the meeting.
Of course it is. Thank you for pointing that out. Thank you. Okay, no other apologies. Okay. Then we've come to the minutes. The minutes of the meeting of the 14th of July. A copy of those minutes was online, and you will have received a copy, and the post councillors will have received a copy. So can we go through these first for accuracy? And we'll take matters arising at the same time. So page 3 of the agenda of the minutes, first page of the minutes. Page 4 of the agenda. Page 5. Page 6, page 7, page 8. That's the last page. Can we accept those minutes as an accurate record? Then I will sign those. Yes, Councillor Tabbett.
Just to indicate agreement, that was all.
Oh, okay, thank you. Thanks for that. Okay. Good. Right, I will sign those as soon as I can as a correct record. Okay, then we are next to declarations of interest. Do any members wish to declare an interest in any of the matters tonight? No, no one. Councillor Tabbett?
My normal ones as a member of Rotary and a supporter of Marlow House, one of the voluntary sector.
Thank you, Mike. And I'm a trustee of Groundwork. I need to mention that as well. Is that all? Yeah. Right. Okay. Then we are on matters referred to the committee for a decision in relation to call-in. There are none that I'm aware of. Any responses of the executive to reports of scrutiny committees? None at the moment. Right. The chair, for me to ask members of the public present if they wish to speak. We have a list of 3 speakers on item 1. That's A, climate change report, and then one of those speakers would also like to speak on Ketteringtown. So they are in the waiting room with us. Okay. Any items of urgency? None that I'm aware of. No. So let's start then on our first report. We have an interesting agenda tonight, climate change. So can I ask James Wilson to present his reports?
Thank you, Chair. Right, so the purpose of this report is to update members on the progress that has been made on the actions to be undertaken by this council to help address climate change. And this was as set out to the council in October 2019. So a report should have come back within 6 months by March, but of course we all went down into lockdown, and unfortunately this is the first opportunity to bring back an update to this committee. So the purposes of the report, in October, the council set out what it was going to try to do prior to April 2021, when it merges into the new unitary authority, and set out a series of actions that it would take itself, and also try to work in relation with partners to be a leader and an influencer in order to try to help meet the targets of the nationally set target of 2050 for net zero emissions, and of course our council's target of 2030. So I'm not intending, Chair, to go through this report in detail because it is quite a lengthy report. What I will do is try to pick out some highlights, and then I'll leave an opportunity for members to question, and obviously there'll be some points raised, I'm sure, by the speakers. But one of the things that the councillors requested that we did was to put some information onto the website. So that was something that happened, almost immediately after October, and there is a link in 2.4. I've set out that link in terms of the pages on the website of the factual information that we've set out about climate change. And then we've also produced this micro site, which is an opportunity for us to showcase some of the work that the council is doing, but also partners, and to really sort of identify issues and to see how locally we are tackling those. So if we go over onto page 10, this then kind of goes through those targets or those actions that we set, and just bringing out a few of these. So the first one is under biodiversity and natural environment, and this is doubling the amount of tree planting from an average of 250 per year. This is the council doing this, to 500 per year. it is actually a bit confusing in the report, but we are actually, we have delivered 419 trees to date within Kettering Borough. So that's our environmental care service. And they have also planted a further 200 trees in Corby. So the other references are to various tree planting by sort of other groups as well. So Desborough Green Space and 420 trees in Wicksteed Park, which is great news. And what we will try to do, members, is where we find out about activities, we will try to update the microsite and put links to all the things that community groups are doing. So then I wanted to raise your attention also to the next item, which is reducing verge cutting in relation to pollination. And there's been a really good response to the campaign of environmental care, to this campaign called Pardon the Weeds, We're Feeding the Bees. So what they do is they leave, and the photograph there shows, they leave the verges so that the early pollinators can come through. The bees can actually get the pollen, move on to other plants and so forth, and then they get cut later in the year. And that's been awarded an International Green Apple Award for Best Environmental Practice. So great recognition there. Moving on, environmental care have also reduced the amount of gypsophate chemical which they use for weed killing by a third, and they want to reduce that even further. Then under transport, so this is rolling out electrical vehicle charging points. Now the councils for charging points in London Road have actually gone live. So they are actually now operational. The ones in School Lane and Commercial Road car parks will be live at the end of the month. And this will increase the level of public charges available in the town centre by 600%. I mean, in this section, it also identifies other actions from other partners. So the County Council are introducing vehicle charging points and doing some consultation, but ultimately installing some vehicle chargers in urban areas where there is on-street parking. So for those areas where you can't charge your car in your drive. And so that's been delayed a little bit because of the COVID pandemic. And then there are other applications that we're consenting. So one at the BP garage in north of Desborough. And this just goes to show, I think, that the charging network is increasing quite exponentially, and it will do over the next few years. I think really government legislation is required to increase this rapidly for new house building, and we are still awaiting the government's consultation response to the new or the future homes standard, which will require all new houses built to have an electrical vehicle charging point, in there in the grounds of that new home. So then we go on to new fleet procurement, and it just sets out how we're requiring all the new fleet to be as eco-friendly as possible. Then moving on to bike storage. So we have done some consultation on this, and I think this feeds also into the local cycle and walking infrastructure plan, which we'll say a little bit more about below. But there will be two areas where we will implement cycle storage in the very foreseeable future. One will be the public realm works, which will go ahead as part of the Heritage Action Zone, and that will probably happen early next year. And that will be around Meadow Road / High Street. And then the other one will be at the Kettering train station, and East Midlands Rail will be delivering that. So I'm not quite sure how many cycle storage points there will be, but that will be two areas within the town centre which will come forward very, very soon. So just talking about the local cycle and walking infrastructure plan, this is a kind of long-term plan over 10 years, which will be done over the next 12 months to identify opportunities for bringing forward cycling infrastructure, such as widening roads, putting in cycle lanes, walking paths, and making sure that they're in the right locations, along with the type of infrastructure such as cycle storage. And then energy use. There's a little bit around future homes for the future, and John took a report to executive last night, which was approved in relation to tendering for this. This basically enables some of these older houses to increase their standard of insulation and thermal efficiency and boiler efficiency to new house standards. So that's going ahead. And then new council house developments, will also be tendered in relation to the development of those, so that they can incorporate the highest levels of insulation and energy efficiency as well. If we go on, there's a little bit more around reduced reuse and recycling, and just basically considering how we can get recycling bins in public areas, but we're still considering how to do that and the best options that we can deliver that through. So that's sort of work in progress. There's a bit more on procurement, but I'll skip over that a little bit. In terms of planning policy, renewable energy at the bottom 3.7 of page 14. So, we have several schemes which are bringing forward very green developments, and I've highlighted 3 that we're currently approving or are in the midst of actually being developed. So the Bunsel Development on the Seagrove Kettering site, this has very green credentials for the whole of the site, but the first building is going up, which has solar panels and very high eco ratings. Secondly, Grafton Underwood Solar Farm. This is a planning application which will consent, and it's for consideration next week at the planning committee. But that would approve a 38 megawatt electricity generating solar farm, which would produce potentially enough power for 11,400 homes. So a really significant development, which I think is very significant in relation to Kettering's energy needs. And then Kettering Energy Park, we're making good progress in relation to bringing forward a master plan and a development brief around that, so that we can spec out the, I suppose the new applications going forward on that for employment land would actually bring proposals forward. There's more sort of issues around tree planting, etc., which set out a little bit of information on Forests for Life and the amount of trees that are being planted through the River Nen Regional Park and that scheme. Just finally, I think I'd want to highlight under the Catalyst for Change 3.9. So this is a project which was led by Environmental Health, Beat the Streets. It was to incentivize walking and cycling. That's been a fantastic and very successful project, and I've just set out the kind of outputs or the outcomes of what that project has actually achieved. So I think I'd leave it there, Chair, in relation to the actual impacts. There is also a section, very brief section on the impacts of the COVID pandemic and the impacts of climate change and air quality. Clearly, with everybody not using their cars to get to work and move around as much as we have been, we've seen a massive increase or benefit in terms of air quality. And I think as we go forward, we will probably like to see and maintain those gains, hopefully by continuing to use these sort of mechanisms, and not having to travel to go to meetings, but have them virtually. So I think there's some more work to be done in relation to how air quality and the impacts from the pandemic can help and assist in the climate change crisis work that we're doing. I'll leave it there, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that report, James. Okay, we have 3 speakers. Right, the first one is Desdell. Speakers will have 3 minutes. I will tell them when when they come into the
I'm
meeting.
bringing them through now,
Thank
Chair.
you. Thank you. Welcome, Des. I don't know whether it's one at a time or hi, you're the first speaker. You will have 3 minutes to speak. So we're listening to what you have to say. Hi, Des. Hello. Right, you have 3 minutes to speak. Maybe you didn't hear because you were probably following us on Zoom. Okay.
Okay, cool. Thank you, councillors and officers. I've been busy comparing this report and the October 2019 report, and the first thing I noticed is that the target year of 2030 for us to be carbon neutral as declared in the climate emergency seems to have been removed and replaced by the 2050 target. In fact, 2030 is not mentioned in this update at all, and why is that? Kettering needs to be a shining example moving to the unitary, especially among our neighbours, as neither Wellingborough nor East Northants declared climate emergencies. Now I follow This Is Kettering on social media, and there's no posts about the climate part of the website going live. In fact, I only found out about it because of this report. This needs promoting. Now the tree planting, thank you for confirming the total number of trees planted as 419. As the report suggests, you're counting total borough-wide plantings, not just those done by KBC, and I believe that figure is closer to 1,000 by including the Eco Group Wicksteed and Desborough Green Space plantings. However, I wonder how many of those trees survive now, as young trees have a high mortality rate, even without the hot summer, as without maintenance and watering, which decimated the Wicksteed planting. I ask, is there a specific KBC tree planting project pertaining to climate change? I'm glad to finally see the EV parking spaces become EV charging points, but what's the time frame for the Burton Latimer charging point from last year's report? And having watched the local cycling and walking infrastructure plan being agreed at the recent exec meeting, will we have to wait for that plan to be completed in 12 months before we see improvements made to active travel infrastructure? When will the recycle bins in parks be installed, and what of the reduce and reuse part, which should always be the priority over recycling? And I note that the new warehouse at Segro is touted as a good thing due to its green credentials. Are all future warehouses on that site and others only going to be approved if they have similar high eco specifications? And are those eco specifications really enough to offset the destruction of essential habitat for thousands of species of animals and the ripping up of soil, meadows, shrubs and trees, which are all essential carbon sinks, to replace them with featureless sheds? Habitats take years to be established, and I ask how the council's declaration of a climate emergency is in any way compatible with the threatened annihilation of Weekly Hall Wood and Wildflower Meadow. Now, regarding the Rockingham Forest for Life project, at a recent Northamptonshire joint planning meeting, it was described as stalled. Is this being taken up again, and when? And is this the half-yearly report? If so, will the annual report be 6 months from now in March? There are some positives to be taken from this. Congratulations to the environmental care team for their award, and well done on the switch to renewable energy, remote working and reduced paper usage. And I'm always grateful for the street cleansing team, Litter Pick's support. I will now end by requesting a Citizens' Assembly. The recent government UK-wide Citizens' Assembly on climate change highlighted the need for information and education for everyone on climate change, and the Kettering Citizens' Assembly would inform the council and the unitary on a more local level. I would also urge all of you to watch the recent David Attenborough documentary, Extinction: The Facts. It's essential for viewing to get an idea of the effects the climate emergency is having. So please do better, form a Citizens' Assembly, engage with the community, and don't water down the 2030 target. Thank you.
Thank you, Des. That was you kept to your 3 minutes, just a few seconds over. Thank you. A lot of points there to think about. I don't know whether James Wilson wants to respond to these questions, or shall we wait until all speakers have been heard? Yes, right. I can see Callum nodding. So thank you, Des. Right, we'll try and get an answer to your question today. Okay.
Just going to put you back in the waiting room, Mr. Dell. The meeting will continue on YouTube for you. Thank you. I'll just bring through our second speaker, Chair.
Yeah. That will be John Padwick. Hello, John. Hi, welcome to the meeting. You're still muted. You have 3 minutes to speak. Okay. Go ahead when you're ready. I still, that's it. Go ahead, John. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, fine. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, councillors. KBC passed the climate emergency resolution in July 2019. It's so important that Kettering continues to champion this in the new authority. And I'm really pleased that Mike Tebbit has been very clear on this. But to be honest, this report seems a little bit half-hearted in many ways. I know it's been difficult with COVID, but let's be clear on this. It is an emergency, and 2030 was the date that the borough was aiming for, not 2050. I note that the air quality figure is going to be ready for the November meeting, and I'll be very interested in that. Obviously, it's a very, very important factor in terms of the health of people in the borough. I noticed that recently, over the past few days, there's been an announcement on Green Bingo. Touching the parks in the Kettering Borough. It's great, but there's been some omissions, including Weekly Hall Wood, which is a piece of significant open space that has been used extensively during lockdown and is threatened now by warehouse development. We don't want to lose open space and woodland. It's really important that we seek to make sure that we are maintaining that and encourage people to use it. Green Bingo would have been useful to use that as a means to do that. Cycle paths, great, but there's clearly some debate on their efficacy. It would be good to address this issue seriously. Electric car charging points, again, great, but a very few. There's been loads of notice to get this done. It almost feels like some of this stuff has been done because there's a monitoring audit committee coming up. It would be really helpful if a real commitment was there and a commitment to be observed. I love the grass verge between Weekly and Weekly Glebe, where wildflowers are planted. Can we see more of that, please? Really, really important. And what can the council do to encourage the development of green jobs? It's going to be really important in the future for young people who are going to be really threatened after the COVID emergency. And in 3.9, there's a mention of working with partners such as Bright Kids to encourage walking to school. I know that's been hit by COVID, but schools are back now. What are we doing to encourage kids to be walking to school rather than coming to school by cars? And finally, I would support the last speaker on looking at ways to explore a citizens' assembly to make sure that there is a broad range of people who can comment and put forward their ideas on this climate emergency, which is clearly a really critical issue for us all. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, councillors.
Thank you, Mr. You're back
Thank you
in
very
the
much.
waiting room.
Thank you.
Hello, Chair. Sorry I'm late.
Okay. I was going to say you've got 3 minutes to speak, but that's our next speaker. Yes, Emily Fedorovic.
Unfortunately, she's not arrived in the waiting room, Chair.
Oh, I see. Okay. Oh, that means, unfortunately, that we can't hear her. Right, Rob? No, it's James. I'm sorry, Rob. James, would you like to respond to the points made?
Well, okay, Chair. I'm not sure. I wrote all of them down, actually. There were so many comments. So what I think would probably be better is if we, had a detailed response to Mr. Dell and Mr. Padwick in terms of what they've kind of raised. But in general, what I would say is the 2030 commitment hasn't been watered down at all. It wasn't mentioned in the report. That 2050 is the national target. So there's still the commitment locally to achieve net zero carbon by 2030. The purpose of getting an action plan out in October 2019 was to ensure that we were doing stuff, not just kind of sitting around suggesting that we could actually put together a strategy and decide then what was the best things to do in terms of reducing our carbon emissions. I think personally the biggest way of achieving this will be for the unitary authority to very quickly bring forward work in relation to a climate change reduction strategy, because you're going to need to have verifiable and calculable reduction targets. So we need to know what our baseline is, but then we need to understand what each project can do in relation to removing carbon from our local atmosphere. But you know, our local activity is also bound up with what we do nationally, because there, you know, in terms of the atmosphere, there's no boundaries and borders in relation to local position or national position. So I think this is a good start. You know, I'm not trying to pretend that we're doing fantastically. There's always an opportunity to improve. But I think in relation to the situation in such that, you know, we've got the unitary authority starting up, we've had a COVID pandemic, that we have progressed significantly a lot of these actions that we said that we were going to, and this report sets that out quite clearly, I think. So what we can do, as I say, Chair, we can go back on those points that were raised by the speakers in detail, and we can try and give more information.
Right, thank you.
But I don't think it's appropriate to go through them one by one.
Right. I undertake as chair to make a list of all the points raised and to keep everyone informed of the answers, okay? To keep track of all these questions, these issues raised, and the response. Greg, I open the floor for debate.
For you, Chair, sorry, before we move on, our first speaker has just joined the waiting room.
Oh, okay. Thanks for letting us know. Is that all right if we? Well, it's only fair that we give her a chance to speak, of course. Yes,
Just bring her through now.
Yes, please.
Hello, Anne.
Hello,
Chair.
Emily. Hi, Emily. Welcome. Someone just called me. Just a moment.
Chair, sorry.
Yeah.
Hi there. Sorry. Am I in?
Yes, we can see you. Just a point. Just a moment, Emily. Yes, Callum, did you?
Oh no, whenever you're ready.
Okay. Hi, Emily. Sorry about the confusion. Right, you have 3 minutes to speak, and right, go ahead. And I'm glad you were able to join us after all. Okay.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I wasn't sure if I got a spot or not. I've been having some problems with my emails, but anyway, thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, councillors. I've just a couple of moments, really. Mainly, I just really want to say thank you for all the great things that we've seen. Obviously, we're making good progress in the tree planting and the EV charging points, the reduction of the emissions via the council vehicles. I'm really excited about the bicycle storage and the actual infrastructure plan. Obviously, the one thing I wanted to comment on was I know that we had some consultation, and I know that you've said that some consultation has been happening, but I actually fed into one of the maps that we fed into for that, and I don't see any reference to that map. Also, obviously, we've had some sort of, they've been dubbed stems, but they've been added into St Mary's Road, or that sort of bit down there. And that's sort of all we've heard from the plan so far. So it'd be great if we can get more visibility on what's planned, and sort of where that consultation has come from. That'd be really amazing. Yes, on the note of trees and sort of that sort of thing, obviously I was one of the people who were planting the 420 trees in the Wickseed Park at February. But yeah, so in terms of that side of things, we've got a huge amount of volunteers. So from that side of things, we really like, if the council can approve some funding for trees, we've got a lot of volunteers who are very keen to get planting. So if there could be some synergy there, that would be amazing. And yes, the only other thing I was going to say as well was also about the Bunsel Development, great name. So yeah, I was just going to say about this, in terms of, whilst it's great that it's an eco warehouse, a little bit like Des was sort of saying, is basically weighing up, is it necessary that we need more warehouses? When we've obviously got quite a lot in Kettering that are underused, and obviously just posing the question if we could possibly utilise the existing ones that we've got and put sort of solar panels on those. I know that people have suggested that in the past, so I'm sure you've considered it. And then finally, just a thing about Beat the Streets, because obviously you say we've got we'd like to have some sort of legacy program, but we obviously saw that that worked really well. I'm assuming that we can't get that back possibly because of COVID, or there might be some other aspects, but it'd be really great to know why we can't get something like that back, because we saw that that was obviously such a huge success. So yeah, mainly just great support, but thanks very much.
Thank you, Emily. You really kept well within your time. Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you. I'm just going to put you back in the waiting room. The meeting will continue on YouTube for you.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. There was this question there about that no reference was made to the map, the interactive map, and I've wondered about that. So if maybe in the debate that could come up, James, or but I don't want to stop other councillors from speaking now. Greg, you wanted to speak?
Thank you, Chair. It's sort of thing I think I better declare an interest here. A bit late on, I do realise, but I do sit on planning committee, and we just touched on a couple of items here which are going to be rather contentious issues about it. One we were going to discuss on the 22nd, so I really not supposed to take part in that, and may have just ruled myself out of the planning committee on the subject, but I will take advice later on that. If I can, after that declaration, I'll just mention the cyclists. I do understand their top 3 reasons of feeling unsafe. I used to be a cyclist myself, but I like to think wisdom came with age here, and I now sit with 4 wheels. It's much better and safer, I think. Well, one of the problems is no safe places for them to ride a bike, especially along major highways. And I'll pick one as the old A43 from Kettering going to Weekly, where I was actually blown off a bike twice by a big 40-foot vehicle who didn't allow a standard gap and wasn't exactly taking his time either. It's kind of frightening, I'm afraid. So yes, I've got some real sympathy with cyclists. We need some more cycle areas along main roads, major roads connecting places. So they got my vote there. Well, Chair, thank you for that, Chair. That's all I've got to say on that.
Thank you, Greg. The next hand up was Ash Davis, and then Jonathan, I've seen that you'd like to speak. Councillor West.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, a few moments late to the meeting, so I missed the presentation and some of our speakers, but really just like to pay tribute to some of the, the immense amount of effort this year with delivering all of these objectives and these fantastic improvements. Clearly, there's always work to do, but I think we're certainly punching above our weight as a council in terms of things like pardon the weeds for feeding the bees. We even had many retweets from people from across the country, from Greenpeace, actually saying to their council, can we do something similar? So clearly, if we can lead the way with this agenda moving forward, build on it, as a solid platform, when I reflect on the change that we've achieved in a year, that can hopefully only just intensify and deliver on our goals. We all share the same desire to make our area greener, our planet greener, and everything starts locally. I really particularly would like to pay tribute to the environmental services team for the wildflowers, as people have mentioned. Flower displays, have given an enormous amount of joy to residents during lockdown. And I think things like Beat the Streets that have been mentioned, if we can find ways to embed this in S106 as well, with planning, so we can get the infrastructure, get this better improvements for cyclists in particular. I think, credit where it's due, but obviously, there's a good platform to hopefully build on it and do even more good things when we take a step forward to unitary. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Ash. Okay. Yes, we have got a fantastic environmental services department that's been widely acknowledged and they've won prizes. Jonathan?
Yes, Chair, thank you very much. Just to say thank you to the 3 speakers. And I don't think they can sing anything better than I can. They asked very searching questions and brought up very important points. And it's important that those are answered. So thank you to the speaker. That's really helpful for us to see where we can improve. But I particularly want to thank James Wilson for the report. I think because we don't work in silos, but it's difficult to bring this all together because we've already talked about planning, housing, environmental health, business strategy, that all these are facets, all our departments in the council have to come together to deliver this. And that's not easy to bring that all together. So I was very impressed by the report that all those strands were brought together in one report, which is what we asked for, wasn't it, Chair? And they delivered on that. So much appreciation for that.
Okay. Are there any other speakers? I'm just looking down the list if anyone's raised their hand. No. Right. I would just wonder whether how we feel about a citizens' assembly, whether we could have some sort of meeting, maybe a way for young people to contribute fantastic ideas, young people, old people, to what we are doing as a council. For instance, the idea about the planting trees, checking up on trees that have been planted to make sure they stay alive. And I also wondered about the net factor of trees, because while some trees are planted, not all of them survive, but also a lot of trees are being taken out through developments. So I wonder whether we keep track of how many trees. Yes, James? Okay.
Hi, Chair. I mean, just on that. So in terms of planning conditions, when we require landscaping schemes as part of a development, we require that any trees that die within a 12-month period are replanted. So there is an ability, because there's a recognition that not all tree species and shrubs or plants will survive. So there's a mechanism in that in relation to new development, and I think the environmental care team does replace on our own land trees that are diseased or dying, etc., so that there's the ability to recover those ones that are being lost. And what I didn't put, I don't think, in the report, no, I did put in the report, but I didn't mention it, was that in Hanwood Park alone, just on the areas that are coming forward at the moment, so that's the Linear Park, Access E, Access F, there's over 5,000 trees that are being planted at the present time, and that's going to be completed probably by November of this year. So we can do so much in relation to our own land, but we have a big influence in relation to new development, and 5,000 trees is a significant start to greening the biggest development in the borough, which is Hanwood Park, which is great, and they're trying to bring that forward a little bit in advance of when they had to, so that it just gives that setting for the new development. So. Okay,
thank you. Ash, you wanted to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Just following on the point of particularly engaging young people, probably about 3-4 years ago, we had a task and finish group on youth engagement, which I chaired. That was a really good process, which produced a number of recommendations. I think one of those was forums, topic-based forums, to make it relevant to the council service. So I don't necessarily think we need to create sort of an assembly, what have you, but let's just use what we've got in existing policy to find ways to involve people, particularly younger people. There's got to be opportunities within that framework to get more people involved.
Could you please explain, Ash, what sort of forum could we then set up in that respect without?
I think the idea back in the day, if I can recall, was to perhaps go around different schools, and I think the idea was initially to make the council more relevant to young people. So that's talking about housing or environment, or it's more topic based. So there's a sense of purpose and structure. It's possibly worth trying going back through and seeing what suggestions were put forward with that task and finish group, and then utilising them. And obviously not just young people, but anyone. Just think it's all well and good having an assembly or a group or a forum, but it's got to have a purpose, and it's also got to be accountable and produce stuff. There's no point just having a meeting to talk about having a meeting.
Okay.
So that's just it's worth going back and having a look and then seeing what we can do with that.
Yeah, I'll take that conversation offline with you to examine with you what we can do. Just one more idea before we conclude this topic. Would it be possible to put something on the council's website to help people who would like to plant trees, give them ideas of what sort of trees, where they can be planted, where to buy them? Because a lot of people would sponsor a tree or a clutch of trees, but don't really know how to go about it. I have already raised this idea with James, and I will take that further if I may. Do you think that's possible, James?
I think it's a discussion to be had with environmental care, in terms of their planting and whether or not we can do that. But yeah, we'll certainly explore that.
That's true. Thank you very much. That's great. Okay, well, that's been a very interesting debate, and I will make a list of all these questions and try and get the answers written up somewhere to distribute them. Next, we're on the Ketteringtown Centre. So that's Rochelle. We do have a speaker, but I'd like to hear your report first, Rochelle. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I do have a slide to go along with the presentation, but Callum, if I just kind of let you know when it's okay to put it up, if that's okay. Thank you.
I'm sorry to butt in. Margaret, you've got your hand up?
Yes. Chair, do you not wish to have the recommendation, please? A proposer and seconder, and then we vote on it. Thank you.
Absolutely. I'm so sorry. I've betrayed my lack of experience in the chair. So thank you for
rushing ahead.
Yes, I am. That's true. So recommendation on number 8 on page 21. Member note the update report and progress made in respect of the Council's commitments toward carbon emission reduction and climate change mitigation. Can I propose we add by 2030, just to reassure everyone that we still have that date in mind?
Yes.
Would that have support, Margaret?
Yes, I'll support that.
Okay. Yeah. Right, Anne, I'll let you take the vote on that.
Do we have a proposer and seconder, Chair?
Yes, I'll propose.
And a seconder?
Second that, Chair.
Okay, Greg seconded. So we just add by 2030 at the end of that.
Yes, yeah. Could we vote on, could you indicate whether you're voting for, against or not voting? Councillor Anne Lee?
For.
Councillor Jonathan West?
For.
Councillor Greg Titcombe?
For.
Councillor Margaret Talbot?
For.
Councillor Mike Tebbert?
For.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, sorry, Rochelle, that had to interrupt you.
Okay, no worries.
Oh, I've got to wait for the result as well, but I think we can guess. That's been passed. That's been carried.
Yes, sorry, Councillor Ash Davis, I missed you out.
Oh, I'm.
Can you indicate whether you vote for? Yeah.
I'm for the recommendation, unless I have to abstain because I missed the report. I don't know how we stand, but
no, that's fine because it's just for noting really, and the addition of 2030. So that's fine. That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you, Anne. Okay, now we really have concluded that item. Thank you for your patience, Rochelle.
No problem. Okay, thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to update members on the activity within Kettering Town Centre, which reflects both the Town Centre Task and Finish Group's recommendations, which were approved by Executive Committee in February, as well as the regeneration project progress linked to the Town Centre delivery plan. This report aims to update on activity since February 2020. It's important for members to reflect on the context of which these activities have been taking place within. Therefore, I have initially outlined the key actions and events at the beginning of the report. We were fortunate to have delivered the Town Centre conference in February, which brought together stakeholders and gave us focused time to discuss and reflect on key projects. This too provided an opportunity for further consultation, for example, on the planned public realm for the High Street Heritage Action Zone, as well as the Station Quarter project. all of which has stood us in good stead to be able to continue progressing these projects. In section 2.3, I reflect on the impacts of COVID-19, which provides important context for the remaining of the report. Callum, if I could ask you to put the slide on screen, please.
No problem at all.
Chair, can I just interrupt for a moment? I need to leave the meeting at this point to join another meeting. My apologies.
On screen, I have visually depicted the key activities that have been completed or secured, as well as those that are ongoing activity. It is my intention that this timeline remains live and provides a great opportunity for the council to demonstrate the diverse activity happening in and around the town centre, as well as linking our key cultural-led regeneration projects. In April, we received confirmation that the Kettering High Street Heritage Action Zone project had been successful. This project amounts to over 4.3 million of physical improvements, and whilst the announcement has been embargoed, we have behind the scenes been working incredibly hard with our Historic England partner and key stakeholders to progress the project. We are anticipating a national launch later this month. Locally, this will see much more information being shared publicly, however, recognising we need to manage those messages carefully considering COVID-19. In light of COVID-19, the resource of the council has been, and rightly so, focused on emergency planning, ensuring essential services are accessible and supporting the local economy. Within that, we have administered and secured and delivered over £17 million, which has provided grants to businesses impacted by COVID-19, as well as supporting the safe reopening of our high streets. Most recently, supporting our town centre delivery plan, we have received confirmation that we are set to receive £3 million of capital investment to support the transformational improvements to our cluster of cultural facilities, the Alfred East Art Gallery, Library and Manor House Museum. The project, known as GLAM, will deliver both internal and external improvements to those fantastic facilities and is a key cornerstone to our cultural-led regeneration plans. These key projects support and the continued delivery of the recommendations set out in Table 1 within the progress update in the report. I won't go through each of them individually, however, I've picked out the key following. Footfall counters are now in place and providing useful data which enables us to understand footfall movement within the high street, new visits and also dwell time. This information helps to articulate performance within active projects as well as inform and influence future activity. Over £8 million of cultural-led regeneration funding has been secured for the town centre to be delivered over the coming 4 years. The High Street Heritage Action Zone has delivered a small pilot scheme for the Shopfront Improvement Grant Scheme, one of 3 capital grant schemes being launched as part of the programme later this month. Electric charging points have been installed in some of our car parks and some are operational, which James has alluded to in his report. The Wayfinding Project, which will see improved signage in the town, has been secured and will be installed this winter. This will provide a heritage look in keeping with the high street plans within our High Street Heritage Action Zone, and it's really important these projects are linked and aligned. Street scene improvements are included within the High Street Heritage Action Zone project also, and will be consulted on with the public shortly. We anticipate this will include decluttering as well as bringing consistency to furniture and plantings to key areas throughout the high street. There are obviously going to be need to consider alternative delivery methods for some areas. For example, the events programme is under review and unfortunately many events have had to be cancelled. However, where there is opportunity, for example, with delivering the cultural programme, the council and our stakeholders will be looking to maximise on this. Whilst COVID has had a huge impact on our business as usual activity, what this report does demonstrate is that also, because of the plans and activity in place to date, it has enabled us to accelerate and advance the strategic direction set by the town centre delivery plan and held a spotlight on these opportunities. Thank you. And if I could now move to the recommendation set out in 9.1. Thank you, Chair.
You're muted, Chair.
of course. We have one speaker on that, John Padwick. So can you bring him in, Callum?
Just bringing him through now, Chair.
Thank you. Hello, John. Hello. Can you hear us? John? Okay. Yes. You're ready when you are. 3 minutes again.
Thank you. COVID's had a major effect on all of us, obviously. For me, I've been home working, I've been teaching by Zoom, which has had its ups and its downs. Speaking personally, it's been interesting. It's been a steep learning curve, and there have been some benefits that I've found, but I also miss meeting other people, exchanging ideas. And I wonder whether Kettering could take advantage of this situation, placed as it is, close to London, so that many people have been used to commuting from to London, but probably have got used to home working and would like there to be the development of things like business hubs here. I noticed that in Yorkshire, towns such as Ilkley have been working with the Centre for Towns. And I wonder whether that might be something that we could be thinking of for Kettering, which would be a positive development in the face of COVID, a positive development for our town centres, and actually would benefit people and would fit into the green economy really, really well. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, councillors.
Thank you very much, John. That's right. I will ask the officers to respond to that. It's an interesting idea.
Put you back in the waiting room, John. The meeting
Thank you.
YouTube for you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, John, for that information. And, you know, yes, I agree. So in terms of actually, interestingly, the GLAM project, part of the aim of that is around economic growth and supporting our local economy, as well as attracting inward investment. So a key part of that is actually stimulating startup businesses, mainly within the creative industries, to be able to have key spaces within those facilities. So part of the design phase that we're looking at is actually encouraging how we could use the facilities to maximise pockets of space where new startup businesses or community groups or individuals that are looking to branch out could actually have a space to work, access support and advice, and also access things like the British Library scheme that supports small businesses, which is the BIPC, which also runs out of Kettering Library. So that's exactly the kind of thing that we're trying to also deliver through this project. Similarly, with the Station Quarter project, which was one of the projects that was talked about at the Town Centre conference, that is looking at, with partners, developing a master plan at the surrounding use of the station. So that's not only just including the public realm improvements, but also how we could attract new investment, whether that be commercial, for instance, things like business hubs and things like that, that could potentially come forward. So yeah, thank you for the comments, really appreciate it. And that's definitely in the, you know, in our themes of what we're trying to aim for.
Thank you, Rochelle. Okay. Would anyone like to? Yes, I see Ash Davis. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to echo really what Rochelle said and pay tribute to Rochelle and her team for the excellent results we've seen. You know, I think the Task and Finish group last year was really, I found it really positive, you know, to bring people together, to generate ideas and actually be realistic and think, you know, we're not going to be able to take Kettering back to what it was like in the 1950s. Retail is not going to be in that position. But obviously there's opportunities for mixed use in the town centre. I think as John Padwick made the point about people working from home, cities perhaps will decline, but there's an opportunity for market towns to rebuild themselves with footfall and working. And obviously we've seen some great shops, independent shops like Deli Block opening and expanding. So that's, you know, there's lots of news stories out there that are positive. And clearly the thing about footfall and attracting visitors will be greatly assisted, I think, by the GLAM investment. That's really good news for our town centre. And I think it's just, you know, just doing the best we can to attract this funding, attract inward investment. And we've got a quality offer in Kettering. Clearly, there's always areas to improve. The Heritage Action Zone will make a massive improvement to the appearance of the town centre. And obviously, as S106 comes in from Hamwood Park, I can't wait till we do the whole lot, you know, Gold Street and Bakehouse Hill and all that. Obviously mindful of timescales and how long that takes, but you know, really pleased to see updates. Obviously, when you're in the task and finish group, you set the plan and the sort of ideas, and it's a year behind, and then obviously in a year's time, it's nice to see tangible step-by-step, you know, examples of actual things being delivered and some really good things. So credit where it's due. Thank you.
Thank you, Ash. Did anyone like to come in? It's an interesting report, Rochelle. Can I just very quickly ask, E4, is there a timeline for the secure cycle storage, because the consultation has been completed? Can you give us an idea on that?
Yeah, so then this really links into what James was saying earlier. So there's a few things going on. Obviously, there's the KBC secure cycle, which was the consultation that was delivered earlier this year, and then also the emergency active travel fund coming online, which is being led by NCC, which also includes temporary secure cycle. In addition to that, then we're aware of other things that are going on in terms of the e-scooters that come into Kettering, and also the developments at the station. So what we are trying to do is align these activities as best we can, and where we can, so there's no kind of conflicts or duplication, but additionally also making sure that these cycle storage units are put in the places where they're needed. So the ones that I'm aware of that are initially kind of coming online and that we should be seeing really shortly are the ones that I think James has already mentioned, which is so we're building a secure cycle storage unit within the HAS public realm, which will be going out to public consultation soon. So towards the end of this month or early October, that public realm scheme for Heritage Action Zone will be in the public domain, and the storage for the cycle units forms part of that, because it's situated within the piece of public realm. And then East Midlands Railway are securing their secure cycle storage at the station, which we're expecting early next year to be actually installed.
Right, that sounds like a longer delay than I expected. I thought we really would be able to install that, well, at the end of the consultation. But let's not have that debate now. I'm sorry, Rochelle. This is about the town centre in general. Right, would anyone like to, are there any more, does anyone else like to comment on that? Well, then I'd like to thank you very much, Rochelle, for your report, and we'll take your recommendation now. On page 33, that this committee acknowledges the update report as set out within table 1. Can I propose that? Is there a seconder? Yeah, Ash, okay. Right, Anne.
Thank you, Chair. If you could indicate for, against or not voting as before. Councillor Anne Lee.
For.
Councillor Jonathan West.
For.
Councillor Greg Titcombe.
For.
Councillor Margaret Talbot.
For.
Councillor Mike Tebbett.
Gone.
Councillor Ash Davis.
For.
That is unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much. That's great. Thank you for that report again, Rochelle, and that's been noted. Okay, let's go to the next subject, welfare reform update, and we've got homelessness after that. So I believe it's Rob. I'll give the floor to you, Rob. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. There are slides with this, Callum.
Yeah, bringing that for you now, Rob. No worries.
Okay, so a welfare reform update. Seems a very long time since we've had one of these, and a lot has happened in terms over the last few months, so I'll try and compress it as quickly as possible. So a bit of the current update at the moment. The back office benefit provision was largely unaffected by the COVID crisis. We managed to redeploy staff quite quickly to work remotely. We've had IT adapted to allow us to answer the phone and such like from home. So that side of the service has carried on generally without too much inconvenience. The business support and admin roles, again, they've been deployed remotely and in some cases more office-based, because obviously enveloping letters, dealing with incoming mail still has to continue. So we've kept an element of staff office-based at all times. The budget support team basically stopped all drop-ins and visits back in March when this broke. However, we quickly went on to doing phone appointments with customers, and we've now reintroduced face-to-face appointments, but only for the most vulnerable customers or those who most need it. But we are building those up gradually as we go along. At the start of this, we introduced an online council tax support only claim form to allow customers to claim council tax support quickly with no unnecessary contact, no paperwork required. And in terms of recovery, that is not directly welfare reform linked, but we stopped all recovery action when this broke out in March, and we're just starting to restart that now, the recovery action. So a gentle reminder was sent out to council tax customers in June, and following the £150 discretionary, which I'll come on to more, we've started to ramp that up. So if we could have the next slide, please, Callum. In terms of the sort of more general picture, obviously the whole situation as it currently is, there's been no further mention of what they're calling managed migration to universal credit. However, there has been a big step up in unmanaged migration with people claiming universal credit, so moving off of housing benefit as a natural occurrence. But the managed migration for those, e.g. on income support, support allowance, is not on the cards at the moment. In light of the happenings, the local housing allowance rates were increased from the 1st of April to be more representative of a 30% market rent. And there's been some increases within certain elements of the Universal Credit Awards to increase customers' awards. There was the discretionary award of £150 to all working age customers in receipt at any point this year of local council tax support. And I've got another slide with more details on that. We've also had no further update on the Citizens Advice Bureau role. Last year, they were tasked with supporting customers to claim universal credit and the online process. That was due for renewal in April. It appears just to have rolled on with no formal sort of announcement at the moment, but we presume that will be reviewed again in March. Can I have the next slide, please? Universal credit figures, they're not very clear. The figures the government publish are not very clear as to exactly what's happened, but the bottom line is you can see there's been a big increase in universal credit claims. Their increase in the mean has gone up by 163% from this period last year. And that period ran through from March through to the end of August for the universal credit claims. In terms of housing benefit, our actual caseload has fallen, which we expected. It's gone down by around a couple of hundred. That's mainly due to people naturally falling off housing benefit onto universal credit as they've had to claim universal credit in the current climate. Local council tax support claims, I put a previous figure there just to give some perspective. Back at the end of 2019, we had 5,220 council tax support claims. At the end of 2020, that dropped to 5,039. It is now back up to 5,338. So though it's only gone up by 300, the amount of claims we received in the last 6 months, last year for the equivalent was 550. This year we've received 1,400 claims. So a lot of people have fallen into circumstances and made what we call speculative claims. So they've claimed because, say, a partner's lost a job, but they've still got one income. So they don't qualify for the award, but they are looking for support. So there's a lot of people whose income has changed drastically, but still remains quite high because they may have one income or they've both been furloughed, but we still had to process and deal with all of those claims. We're also expecting there may be a further spike possible when the furlough schemes end and some firms look at more redundancies or changes to working practices. Thank you, Callum. The Discretionary LCTS award, the government announced this back in March that they were giving us, and they gave us £584,000. with the expectation that we deliver £150 to every customer of working age in receipt of council tax support. We advised customers this was coming straight away back in March. However, unfortunately, we were unable to actually award it until August. This was solely due to software issues. The software houses had no warning this was coming. They had to rewrite a lot of programs. They had to make programs that worked, that delivered it correctly, paid the right people, and paid it correctly in the future. However, once it was in, we got it tested within a couple of weeks and rolled out. And initially on the 18th of August, we gave 3,348 customers a total award of £498,063. The scheme does, well, not the scheme, but the guideline says that we should award the £150 to customers as they claim throughout the year as well. And as it stands in that first sort of just under a month, we awarded an additional 15,000. We currently have around 70,000 left to award now over the next 6 months. And the likelihood is, depending on how the claim levels go, is a lot of that will go out. So we expect all customers will receive £150 unless their liability is lower, and there's only a handful of those due to our scheme. And we expect to keep awarding this. Should any monies be left over, which we're going to monitor how it's moving over the next 2 to 3 months, then any additional monies can be distributed and awarded through our budget support team. We can do it through a local welfare approach. But at this stage, we're not rolling that out because we think that going forward that a lot of that 70,000 remaining will be eaten up by existing customers. Thank you, Callum. And finally, discretionary housing payments. We've had to date 266 applications and given out 228 awards. We've spent approximately 55,000 and we've got 150,000 remaining. There has been a noticeable slowdown on expenditure and on claiming. The anecdotal evidence of this is that because landlords aren't evicting, recovery was suspended, the increase in local housing allowance rates, the general economy situation is customers aren't being chased so much for their rent, so they're not claiming DHP. We send out renewal claims for all existing customers in March, April. We roll their claims on. This year we roll them onto a point in June and we invite them to renew. Last year we had over a 70% uptake of renewal. This year it's under 30%. So we are now proactively contacting those customers who haven't reapplied to see if they should have reapplied. We're also working with the housing team and advising them where they've got customers who are in arrears who've previously had a discretionary housing payment and have not reapplied, to work with them to reapply, and any others that new cases that have moved into arrears that are in receipt of benefit to apply for discretionary housing payment. We do expect there to be a surge in demand when the recovery starts. So the underspend we've got at the moment, as furlough ends and we start recovering, we start taking eviction action, unless the government delay that further and further, then we will get a surge in the demand for discretionary housing payments. We still continue at the moment to work with customers wherever possible via the social inclusion team to maximise their income, reduce their expenditure, and reduce that dependency. However, as I said earlier, the level of that work has been greatly restricted by COVID, and it is at the moment face-to-face only with the most vulnerable and needy customers who we can't help over the phone, or who we can't encourage and work with to liaise with their own creditors. Thank you very much. If there's any questions, I'm happy to take them through the chair.
Thank you very much for that report, Rob. Does anyone have any questions for Rob? I just wonder, Rob, you must be seeing a lot of misery. I just wonder, is there something more that we can do, especially to support families with children?
In respect of those customers who were already in receipt of benefits prior to this, in fact, their position in quite a lot of cases has often improved. Their housing allowance has gone up. The awards in universal credit have improved. So those customers, particularly those with large families that receive benefit, their situation generally actually hasn't changed a lot. The area we're seeing the problems with, to an extent, is those, you know, you may have had a couple both earning 40,000 a year. One of them has lost a job. One of them is still earning 40,000 a year, but their income has halved in their terms. And that's not an area we're equipped to deal with. You know, that's a totally different area from that which we're normally equipped to dealing with the vulnerable, those on low incomes, dealing with creditors. So yeah, it's a completely new market of customers we're seeing, and a lot of those are those speculative claiming and not getting, you know, not getting an award or benefit. It's harder as well, since a lot of the emphasis is now shifted over to universal credit. We can't go out in the community because of COVID and advise people how to claim universal credit, work with groups before. If we had large redundancies, we would approach the employer and ask to work with them, you know, hold a forum. Unfortunately, none of that can happen at the moment. So it's quite a difficult one at the moment, because a lot of those people are in a completely new boat for themselves as well.
Thank you. I find that fascinating to hear, because you find out on the ground what's happening. Thank you very much. A lot of the council's partners are doing invaluable work, groundwork, with the food they provide, and accommodation concern are helping as well. Okay, right. Just checking if there's a recommendation for us to note your report. I'm sorry.
No recommendation on that. That was just a presentation.
Thank you very much, Rob. I'm sorry, I should have checked ahead.
No, that's all right. Thank you.
I found it very interesting. Thank you so much for coming to the meeting and giving that report.
Thank you.
And then John, I think, or Carly, both of you, I'll give the floor to you to present your report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Callum will put up the report. We're just going to very briefly do three things. We're going to look at trends in homelessness data over the past few months and look at the impact of COVID on that. We're also going to tell you about the work that's been undertaken to take rough sleepers off the street and the challenges that's presented and where we're going with that. And the third area is to give you some information about Ketteringtown Lettings Plus, which is our new scheme for engaging with private landlords, which got approved by Executive earlier in the summer and is actually got off to a really good start. So I'm going to hand over to Carly now, who'll bring you through the presentation.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, as John said, so members have already received this presentation by way of an update on homelessness in advance of this meeting. So I do intend to provide a very brief summary of the headline information. Next slide, please, Callum. Okay, so first of all, this graph just shows the number of approaches that our housing options team are seeing in blue and the number of temporary accommodation placements that are made in red. So on average, our housing options team continue to see 25 new approaches each week from households seeking assistance. And over the last year, we've placed an average of 2 households per week into temporary accommodation. Next slide. So unsurprisingly, COVID-19 has impacted trends that we're seeing in terms of the reasons for homelessness. So the pie chart on the right shows the data so far this financial year. And essentially what these graphs show is an increase in people approaching us that are homeless due to family and friend evictions, relationship breakdowns, and domestic abuse, and a reduction in approaches resulting from the ending of private rented tenancies and social rented tenancies, unsurprisingly with the eviction ban. Next slide, please. Okay, so this graph shows the number of households accommodated in temporary accommodation and the downward trend in the council's use of temporary accommodation. So of the 88 households in temporary accommodation today, only 3 of those are accommodated outside of Kettering Borough, which is positive. And just by way of comparison, the last time we presented this chart at Monitoring and Audit Committee in February, we had 149 households in temporary accommodation. Next slide. So reducing our reliance on temporary accommodation is the combined result of various factors and initiatives, many of which came from our temporary reduction action plan that we launched in July last year. So it focused on move-on plans for customers in temporary accommodation and removing blockages in the homeless process. So just pick on one of these, for example. One thing that's been particularly successful is providing dedicated tenancy support to some of our most long-standing and more households with more complex support needs to address debt and other barriers that were preventing them moving on into more settled accommodation. Next slide, please. These tables simply show the continuing impact of our work to try and reduce the use of temporary accommodation, and they compare snapshot data from the last M&A committee meeting homeless update that we gave to the data last week. So of most significance in here is the reduction of over half in the use of council properties for the purposes of providing TA. You can see that's reduced from 90 in February to 44 as at last week. And also there's been a reduction of over half in terms of the number of larger families with 3 or more children that we're accommodating in temporary accommodation. And that's at least partly been achieved by providing private rented sector offers for some of our larger families. Next slide. This graph shows the number of positive outcomes each quarter where we've prevented or relieved homelessness since the Homelessness Reduction Act came into force. So you can see that performance improved significantly as the teams got to grips with the new legislation. The coronavirus lockdown did impact our ability to successfully prevent and relieve homelessness in some ways in the first quarter of this year. But the team are committed to further shifting our focus and we're on the right track in this current quarter to, again, prevent and relieve more homelessness. Next slide, please. So moving on to rough sleeping, I'm going to really briefly run through the approach that we took to rough sleeping in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. So preempting the unsuitability of shared sleeping spaces, we'd already planned to accommodate all of our rough sleepers and service users of the night shelter prior to the government announcement that we should bring everyone in. So we accommodated 15 rough sleepers in self-contained properties by the end of March. We communicated our plans for identifying and accommodating new rough sleepers to our partners, and we worked together to put together keep safe packs and move-in packs of essential items for rough sleepers to help them to remain safe during the pandemic and to stay indoors during lockdown. Next slide, please. So whilst we did achieve everyone in by the end of March, perhaps of more importance was the need to keep everybody in and ensure that those accommodation placements were successful in the medium to long term. So central to this was the multi-agency provision of housing and related support, included intervention from Accommodation Concern, the police, substance abuse services, mental health services, and others. So to ensure that we have a robust approach moving forward for new sleepers, our outreach workers complete twice weekly counts in the early hours of the morning to try and identify new rough sleepers. And we've also recruited a new rough sleeper coordinator to oversee and bring together our service offer for this vulnerable group. Next slide. So some current data, which I'm sure members have already digested, so just pick out some headlines. So it shows that we've brought in 20 rough sleepers so far using our discretionary accommodation powers, of which 13 are currently accommodated. We've also supported 34 individuals that were rough sleeping or at risk of rough sleeping into settled accommodation since lockdown. We're still finding a small number of rough sleepers on our twice weekly counts, but the majority of those are very new to the streets, and we've got a robust approach in place where we intervene early and do all we can to engage them and work with them as to how we can support them to move away from rough sleeping. Next slide, please. Okay, so we will continue to take the COVID-19 approach to rough sleeping and using our discretionary powers to assist the most vulnerable and entrenched rough sleepers as part of our wider plan to end rough sleeping. So we aim to have our website updated during October to reflect our new approach and to clarify our winter plan for this year in light of the fact that the night shelter and those shared sleeping spaces are no longer suitable. Final slide, please. Okay, so finally, I have a slide regarding our new private rented sector access scheme, which is called Ketteringtown Lettings Plus. So essentially, this aims to increase access to private rents for those that are homeless or at risk of homelessness by providing a menu of practical and financial incentives for private landlords. So the scheme is proven popular so far with landlords, and we've already achieved some excellent outcomes for our homeless customers, whilst also improving standards in the private rented sector by using our landlord improvement grant and reducing the number of empty homes. Okay, next slide. And so if there's any questions, back to you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm really impressed by all the work that's happening behind the scenes, and I'm sure this presentation isn't even half of it. It's Ash, yes?
Yeah, I agree with you, Chair. You know, there's a huge amount of work, firstly with Rob and his team on their side, but also Carly, John, housing team, brilliant. You know, it's clearly been very, very difficult. And obviously we were sort of moving positively towards Wellington House with safe until daylight, and obviously then COVID came and that changed everything. So there's been a lot of, you know, agility with decision making. So that's, you know, a good thing. Good to see that private landlords are being brought on board and engaged with, because they hold the key to a lot of these solutions. So really keep up the good work. You know, I think I'd like to, it's good to hear that all the information is going to be put on the website, just so it's accessible to people when they need it, and obviously clear how they can hopefully get help at their hour of need. So yeah, very, very impressed. Thank you, Chair.
I couldn't agree more. Well said, Ash. I just wonder how the staff is coping in these difficult circumstances where they cannot have the same contact with residents who need help. It must have been managed very well to have those impressive figures. So thank you very much for that report, giving us an insight. Thank you for everything you're all doing. Does anyone else would like to comment on that? No? Well, thank you for those presentations, for giving us your time for those. Right, then we have the next item, if I'm not mistaken, Colin. It's our key performance information booklet that was sent out to us last night. Those figures will be available in the minutes of this meeting. Have you all received those numbers?
Yeah.
Have you gone through them? Would anyone like to make a comment on the figures? I'm just looking at the figures now. Some of those figures, of course, especially with planning, I assume it is just because you haven't had the planning committee meetings, James. I'm looking at on page 4 that you weren't able to process applications at the same speed, but that's inevitable because we didn't have the committee meetings. Your department must have had problems with that.
Yeah, that's right to an extent, Chair. I think, you know, we've had a backlog of applications going to committee. It has taken longer also because of site visits and other things to process applications. So our performance, you know, is not as we would want it to be, but in the context of COVID, pandemic, etc., I think, you know, we're doing the best that we can, and we shouldn't, you know, denigrate, you know, the massive work that we have to do on top of everything to you know, to get applications going. So we're trying to keep it rolling forward, but it's challenging times. That's all we'd say there.
Absolutely, I completely agree with you. Right, would anyone like to comment on any of the figures? Going through the figures here. Catering training services, fantastic outcome for our trainees. Lisa, would you like to say anything about that?
No, I mean, it's the same. It's a bit of a repeating theme, really. But yet again, you know, it's one of those services again that thinking about the level of contact that normally you would have with those young people at Catering Training Services, which at the beginning of March was completely wiped out. And we are being creative about how we take some of these services forward. But as I say, it's a continuous message you'll have heard a number of times this evening.
I completely agree. Thanks. Right. It's just with the mobility scheme. Can I just make one comment about that? At the moment it's only open on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, but that's not reflected on the website. So I wonder whether we could put a note on the website, because on the website it's still shown as open Monday to Friday. But anyway, that was just a personal comment. Greg?
Thank you, Chair. I have one question. I always like to see a 100% markup, but I see one here that we have 111%, 0.39, if you want to be, the overpaid benefit recovered as percentage of current year overpayments. Could you explain or could somebody explain 111%? Thank you, Chair.
If you may, Chair, yes, I can hope that I haven't got the figure in front of me, but we've had this problem before. The way that performance indicator works is it looks at the money recovered from all years against the debt raised this year. So, for example, if on the 1st of April we raised a debt of £5 and recovered £1,000, it would be hundreds of percent. So it's a bit of a bizarre indicator. And it can go above 100%, and that's the reason why. So if we get somebody make a big payment of a historical debt, we've not raised as much debt this year because of COVID, then that was what will push it up. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that.
Okay. Are there any other comments on the figures? Guys, sorry, I didn't even let you introduce those figures. I do apologize. Would you like to add anything to that?
Thank you, Chair. No, it's not a problem at all. I think Councillor Titcombe actually did, I think, gets the points for spotting that particular figure. One of the things I was going to explain was we've had a few operational technical challenges getting the data together for you. We felt as officers it was important that you had something here this evening, because it's important for you to see how the organisation is performing and continues to perform in the COVID-19 situation. And I think it's encouraging to see that, you know, services are still actually delivering. However, you can see where there are some impacts. So I think the 111% is kind of not only a function of the way it's calculated, but also the document perhaps hasn't gone through quite the same quality control arrangements that it would have done. Although what we have done is we have changed the format of some of the information. So you've got it in portrait as well as landscape in case you were looking at it digitally on your screen. I think what we're hoping to do is by the next March and Audit Committee is have your full suite of data back again. So we see it as a bit of a speed bump rather than a permanent feature. But if you've got any further queries, I'm sure myself and colleagues would be happy to answer them, Chair.
That's fine. Thank you. Thank you for that. Not at all. I mean, I can understand with Rob's explanation, and we have had that before the previous meeting. It's not at all a quality issue. It's been explained, and it does make sense to me. And I'm grateful that you managed to produce the figures for tonight's meeting. Right. Any further comments? No. Then all that remains is for us to look at our program. We only have 2 meetings left, and a lot of that is already filled in through statutory reports. Lisa, would you like to speak on that?
Thank you, Chair. So as you'll see, there are the standing items on the work committee, but just wanted to push the things that are programmed in for the next meeting on the 25th of November. So that will be, we've had quite a finance-free meeting tonight, haven't we? But I'm afraid the next one's not quite so clear. So we'll have accounts 2019-20, the next meeting, and the ISA 260, which is the quality control document that you will be familiar with. and the certification of grants, which KPMG will present. Then the two other items will be leisure update, and I think we'll be in some position to be able to do a little bit more around, let's cross fingers we're not in a second wave, and the plan is to be able to do some sort of COVID-19 review, because we'll have been sort of 6 months in the process. I don't think it'll be the end game. I think it'll be an update, again, an update on where we are and looking forward. But Chair, I do want to just point in that should we have a situation where we do go into a potential second wave, and if some of the things that we were doing in April, May, such as shielded work and protecting the vulnerable and different communities, if we were having to do that during October, that might mean that that will pull us off doing that review of COVID, because it'll be the same people who were delivering those services in March, April will be the same people that I'd want to talk to get that review report in. So I just wanted to flag that up just in case. And then I think the meeting after that, not programmed onto the work programme here, but we will have a lot of close down documentation, particularly around finance towards the end of the year as we move towards the close of KBC. So I just need to work through with Mark what that close down process, what it looks like. We've got a framework for it, but there will be quite a significant financial close down of the organisation leading into March the 31st, obviously. And a lot of that will be for this committee to look at.
Yes, understood. Thank you, Lisa, for explaining. I hope we can find time in February for a last revisiting of climate action, even if it's to a smaller report or a shorter report than this time. But we will see how that goes. Well, all that. Would anyone else like to add anything? Otherwise, we're approaching the end of this meeting, and I would like to thank you all for attending. Thank you very much for presenting your reports, for bearing with us. Thank you to the speakers, and well, I hope you have a pleasant evening. Thank you very much.